Max Verstappen makes history by claiming pole position for the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix. An unexpected pole, may I add. From RacingNews365.com, my name is Nick Golding and I'm joined, as always, by lead editor Ian Parks, who's got his SPF 50 on. Ian, I say Verstappen makes history. He has matched Ayrton Senna's record at Imola, of all places, for 8 consecutive pole positions. He's also matched a record by Alain Prost for claiming the first 7 poles in a season. Red Bull were lost for words on Friday, but Verstappen is back with a bang on Saturday.
According to Helmut Marko, he was lost for superlatives as well in trying to describe what Max Verstappen did today, and then he actually came up with one and described it as magical. I guess you could say that on this occasion, Max Verstappen pulled a rabbit out of the hat in many respects, because what he did today was literally quite magical. We talked extensively yesterday about what a bad day it was for Max. His own words, effectively. It just did not go right for him. He wasn't happy with that RB20, what it was doing. And it was down on the timesheets. But when the going gets tough, the tough get going. And that is exactly what Red Bull and Max Verstappen have done today. They showed their hallmark as to both why they are constructors and drivers champions over these past couple of years. Now, Max obviously 3 in a row in terms of the drivers' title. It is what you expect of a front-running team, that when there are difficulties, that they can turn it around. And that is exactly what Max Verstappen did. A touch of luck, according to McLaren team principal Andrea Stella, referring to the fact that Max on that lap managed to get a bit of a tow from the Hastad Nico Hulkenberg. And when you think that there was only, if I can remember this right, 0.074 seconds to Oscar Piastri in second place, and yes, we will come on to Oscar in a second, and his grid penalty. And then Lando Norris in his McLaren only 0.017 seconds behind Piastri, so less than a tenth of a second separating the top 3. It gives you some idea as to the how that little bit of a tow came into its own to a certain extent. Andrea Stella did also mention that Oscar made a small mistake on his lap. That could have contributed to it. Maybe a gust of winds, even something as simple as that, he said, could have created that small gap between Max and Oscar. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how you do it, what the circumstances are. It's Formula One. You get on that pole position any way you can, and that is exactly what Max and Red Bull have done, turning the tide from what happened on Friday.
Exactly, and in many ways, Verstappen has shown the difference between an F1 driver and an F1 world champion, because Sergio Perez, who was not an F1 world champion, was knocked out in Q2, P11. Not only was he knocked out in Q2, he was the only Red Bull-owned driver, let's say, not in Q3, because both RBs made Q3, and obviously Verstappen did as well. It's, Max has kind of gotten on top of Red Bull's issues a little bit, but Sergio, it's just not the case.
One of those days for him, wasn't it? When you think that it also put his Red Bull in a barrier in third practice.
That as well, yeah.
So not a great day for him. And as you mentioned, Yuki Tsunoda starting 7th, Daniel Ricciardo starting 9th. And at a time when Checo really needs to show his worth to the team, it's all of a sudden not started to go right for him. Pretty much at about the same time last season, when you look back to the Miami Grand Prix of last year, after what Max and Checo had done over the first 4 races, when they shared 2 victories apiece, and everybody was talking about Checo potentially threatening Max for that title before Max absolutely blew him out the water. Well, here we go. A considerable gulf between the 2 drivers coming out of Q2. This, as I say, is not what Checo wanted. He has to start proving his worth again to Red Bull if he is going to secure that second seat, because we know he's out of contract. We know there are many drivers that would absolutely love to be in the position alongside Max Verstappen next season in that RB21 in 2025. It's got a lot of competition, as I say, and he's got to start doing something to ensure he's got that seat for next season. Otherwise, he will be out.
Absolutely. And of course, for those who are watching, let us know your thoughts on Checo's performance today in the comment section below. Moving on to McLaren, who you did mention a couple of minutes ago. Provisionally, it was Oscar Piastri in second with Lando Norris in third. However, Piastri has been slapped with a three-place grid penalty, rightly so, based on the footage for impeding Kevin Magnussen in Q1. Kevin was absolutely furious, it's fair to say. Piastri will now start fifth, which means Lando's on the front row alongside Max. It's a slam dunk penalty as you can get.
Yeah, as you pointed out, Nick, an absolute slam dunk penalty. I will refer again to the comments of Andrea Stella, and he remarked that Oscar had one of two choices. He'd either take to the grass or the gravel, or he'd go through that chicane at the quickest possible speed he could, because there's only one line through it at the end of the day. So the only choice, the only reasonable choice that he had, of course, was simply to go through it as quickly as he could. But there was a speed differential in the stewards report of 140 kilometers an hour. That is hugely significant, even for a Formula One car with the stopping power that these things have. And when the warning came through from McLaren to Oscar, it was way too late. Apparently, there was only 50 to 60 meters difference between the two cars when he was told, Kevin's behind you. So, as you say, slam dunk penalty, starts fifth. McLaren now with a little bit of work to do with Oscar, because that means that he will have both of the Ferraris ahead of him. And if we want to go straight into the Ferraris, if that's a good segue with my comment there, go for it. They were hoping for pole position.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Spoke to Charles Leclerc in the driver's pen post-qualifying, made it quite clear that with the upgrades on this car, and it's a significant upgrade package as well, and in particular with that way that car performed in Friday practice, with Charles quickest at both the end of FP1 and FP2. Naturally, he was hoping for pole position. So he believed, obviously, the suggestion was that whilst he performed well in Friday practice, that couldn't quite ascertain the fuel loads. Of course, Friday practice is what it is. The drivers, the teams don't run their cars at the maximum because they know they've got Saturday to come. They don't want to give everything away. But nevertheless, there was enough within what Charles and Ferrari did to indicate that they had a very realistic shot at pole position. It didn't come off. Charles was then quite blunt in his comment, turning around and saying, well, quite obvious now we can see what the fuel levels were in Friday practice because qualifying has given us those fuel levels, and Ferrari were off the pace. Surprisingly so as well, because Q1, Charles got through Q1 on the mediums.
Yeah.
The only driver to do so. And you thought, hello, he's not even put the soft tyres on yet. This could be quite significant. Never happened for them. But every indicator points to the fact that they do have really good long run pace. And I'm not discounting them, not only from a podium, but from the win, because I do think they are going to be a threat in that race. It's going to be an absolutely fascinating battle. I don't see Max pulling away as he has done.
Yeah, completely agree.
In previous races. I do not see him doing that. I think McLaren, in particular Lando alongside him, and bearing in mind, this is one of the longest runs down to a turn one that we have in Formula One. So I do think Lando's going to keep him honest, and I do think the Ferraris as well behind are going to keep him honest. It's going to be a fascinating tussle at the front. As I say, I don't see Max disappearing into the beautiful sunset that I've got going on behind me in tomorrow's Grand Prix, Sunday's Grand Prix.
Well, I suppose also in tomorrow's race, there'll be a few eyes watching what the Sky does. But you're absolutely right, because we've seen this weekend so far, despite Max being on pole, Red Bull haven't been at the races. McLaren and Ferrari are looking very strong. So I think tomorrow could potentially be a five-way fight for the victory, perhaps. Interestingly, though, Carlos Sainz was only 1,000th quicker than George Russell in qualifying. So Mercedes 6th and 8th, 6th for Russell, 8th for Hamilton. Not quite there, but it does seem, at least with Russell, the performance is getting better in terms of a comparison to Ferrari.
Yeah, Lewis said that he's just can't match him at the moment. George seems to keep finding something within the setup. across pretty much every Grand Prix weekend so far, and he's outperforming Lewis, especially in qualifying, as we've seen so far. So George has at least got something out of these upgrades, but they both did indicate that that was pretty much the maximum that they could do. They were never going to be any higher, although, as you did point out there, a thousandth of a second between Carlos and George. So that's not even as I mentioned earlier, that's just a win. That's anything that separates those two. We're talking about a hair's width here, aren't we? So, but I don't think in terms of race pace that those two guys, Lewis and George, are going to be able to mix it at the end of the day with Red Bull, Ferrari and McLaren.
Again, completely agree. Just to quickly run through the top 10 before we get on to our penultimate talking point. It's Verstappen on pole, Norris in second, Leclerc and Sainz on the second row, Piastri fifth, Russell sixth, Yuki Tsunoda in a superb seventh, Hamilton eighth, Ricciardo ninth, and Hulkenberg doing the job for Haas again in P10. In that top 10 is not a certain Fernando Alonso, who quite frankly has had the day from hell, crashed in FP3, causing a red flag, and then would have been qualifying in P20 had Logan Sargent's final lap in Q1 not been deleted, so P19 for Alonso. I mean, it's rare to see the two-time world champion make mistakes, but mistakes have been, on his agenda today.
Yeah, and, the team did all it possibly could to get Fernando out into Q1, so he really felt that he had to push the envelope there with what was effectively a repaired car because of the damage that it caused, in particular to the rear end, with that crash in FP3 coming out of Rivazza. Car just got away from him, turned it round, pretty much hurtled across the gravel going backwards and hit the barrier with the rear of that car, causing significant damage. So as I say, he really had to try and push things in Q1, overdid it, got onto the gravel again, could have lost the car again, managed to save it back into the pits for a fresh set of tyres, but by then the damage was already done. Just, as you say, Nick, not a day that he will want to remember. Aston Martin, though, speaking to Lance Stroll as well, those upgrades have not really worked. They've improved the car marginally, but certainly nowhere near to the extent that they would have been hoping for, as McLaren has shown with the upgrades that were on the car in Miami, as Ferrari has shown with the upgrades that are on the car here. Yes, not the pole position and the qualifying times they were hoping for, but as I've mentioned, they most definitely will be in the mix Grand Prix pace-wise going into Sunday.
What's really interesting with Aston Martin and their upgrades is we saw last season that when they introduced upgrades, they actually took a step backwards in performance, and whether it's just Imola or perhaps, something that will continue into the coming races, but it seems that, again, their upgrades have kind of led to a step backwards. So that's something definitely to watch.
Not a step backwards. It's not a step backwards.
Just not as big a step forwards.
Yeah, that's a better way to put it. Last year was definitely a step backwards. In fact, that was more likely 2 step backwards and then some, with what they did to that car. This is a bit different. As I say, it's fractions, but it's pretty clear that they've come with a significant package. 9 different areas of that car that they've thrown parts at it, and it's no different. You can imagine that owner Lawrence Stroll and team principal Mike Pratt will not be happy with what they've seen so far over the course of this weekend. So without a shadow of a doubt, they've got a hell of a lot more work to do in front of them to get this car right and to give Fernando something of a more stable platform that he was accustomed to at the start of the season that was getting him all those podiums.
Certainly something interesting to watch in the coming races, but focusing on tomorrow's race, bold predictions, it's that time. I'm going to go first, give you some time to think. I'm going to say, I've got a few actually, I've been thinking about this. I'm going to say...
Hold on, leave me something then if you've got a few.
Okay, well, I'm going for both a dry and a wet. If it's a normal race, I think Lando's going to win.
Rain. I can tell you now, it won't rain, but go ahead.
This means it is going to rain because whenever we say something, typically the opposite happens. So it's going to mean a very wet race is coming. I'm going to go...
Maybe we get everything wrong. Yeah, go for it, mate.
Except for the Miami. I did call that. I reckon we're going to have a Lando win. Just something about him at Imola just seems to work. And we've seen McLaren Toto Wolff even said that McLaren are a good chunk faster than everyone over both one lap and distance. So that'd be interesting to see if that does correlate into something tomorrow. So I'm going to go Lando win, Yuki Tsunoda top 5 because he has been on it all weekend. If it does rain, a George Russell podium. There you go. So
Why only
I'm
if it rains?
thinking if I go a few bold predictions, then my chances of one of them being true increases. So, but at the same time, if it doesn't work, then I just look worse. So,
well, that's 3. What am I left with? What do you want me to go for on the back of that?
We can share.
We have not shared.
Well,
You've gone for 3 in a row, and I've got not much left.
Have you got anything different?
Well, not really on this occasion.
No, a Ferrari
where
podium.
Do I go?
Whoa. Come on, you've said you did. You kind
That's
of gave.
Not exactly bold, though, is it?
The thing is that you did kind of give a little prediction without really mentioning it. You said you think Ferrari have got a chance. I think a Ferrari win.
I should, simply based on their race pace. But saying a Ferrari podium is not exactly bold on the back of that. Particularly when they start 3 and 4. So,
you could be really bold. Given something we spoke about in the podcast, you could say a Carlos Sainz win.
No, because he's not on it this weekend.
That makes it bold.
Well,
come on, you've got to give something. I know I've taken a few, but
anything. Okay, Lewis Hamilton top 5. There we go.
That's bold on all of mine combined. I think that's saying something. Let us know.
Probably means a few things are going to have to happen ahead of him to get that, but why not? Let's go Lewis top 5.
We've seen drama
even
happen.
Ahead of George.
Well, yeah, we've seen drama happen in Imola before, so who knows what's going to happen. Let us know in the comments section your thoughts and join myself and Ian for tomorrow's F1 update after the race. From myself and Ian, this has been the Racing News 365.com F1 update. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. We will see you tomorrow.
Take care, folks.